would like to make, we always have an open mic. We've been hosting open mic sessions before regular council meetings at the start of this year, just to try something a bit different. Our next meeting on April the 24th, just due to an in-camera meeting that council needs to have, that public session will be cancelled. So I just want you to know, because we need to have the in-camera before we start our regular meeting, and I'm not available before 6 o'clock on that day. So we'll look at continuing on at the May, having one again before the first regular meeting in May. The intent of the open mic forums was a bit of a trial period for a few months, just to see if this was something that members of the public would find to be of interest. So any feedback you have, I did receive some earlier today, is greatly appreciated, and then we can look to see how we continue on in the time to come. So thank you for that. At this point then, I'd like council to approve tonight's agenda with the addition of the there's some, it's new business, but it's also supplementary to a correspondence item. So if I could have that. Okay, moved and seconded with the addition. And so I'll call the question on that. All those in favor, please. Opposed, motion's carried. And the other one is that item 9.26723 Ayre Road Remedial Action Resolution to be moved immediately following the delegation of 6717 and 6723 Ayre Road. That's moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. We do have meeting minutes to adopt. There's a special meeting of council from April the 3rd, please. Moved adoption by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any corrections or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. There was a comment that the notice for the special meeting wasn't posted in our display board downstairs, so that's just a note for staff, please, going forward, if we could just confirm that it is posted. Okay, thank you. So I'd like to move into our delegations. We do have 4 today. The delegations are limited to 5 minutes per delegation unless there's a motion to move past that from council. So just for all the speakers, there is a timer and a red, yellow, and green. If you could please be mindful of the time, and there's 5 minutes. So I would like to welcome our first one, Freedom Mobile presentation, Mr. Jeff Bray, Capital Public Affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect. You can go to the next page. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. My name is Jeff Bray, and I'm a consultant working with Freedom Mobile, and actually with us is the General Manager of Freedom Mobile, Dean Price, who's also a Sooke resident. So thank you very much. We can go to the next page. Freedom Mobile, as you may recall from my presentation last year, is the 4th national carrier that is building out its network throughout Canada that's going to provide choice and lower rates for consumers. And we're currently in the process of planning our build for the Capital Regional District. And certainly there's a lot of anticipation with having more competition and choice, and so we're busy in the process of now actually finalizing those plans and starting the build. We can go to the next slide. And, you know, our approach has always been to work with local governments rather than relying on any sort of jurisdictional arguments, and work with staff and elected officials in each community to make sure that we're really developing a plan that fits with the community needs and expectations. And certainly we've done that throughout the capital region. And previously we have met with the mayor just as an introduction, and last November we were here to briefly just outline our sort of top line plans, what we were looking at doing in the Sooke area. And that was actually very beneficial because we got quite a bit of feedback from the community about their concerns around coverage in the Sooke area and the Highway 14 corridor. And we started to learn about lots of areas that have poor coverage or no coverage, and certainly that got our radio frequency engineers really looking at our plan. So we can go to the next page. And we really recognize that because of the topography and the population and the growth, that our original plan that had 2 towers within the town, 1 rooftop installation and 1 co-location, actually wasn't going to provide the coverage that citizens were saying that they were hoping to see in the future. And so we really just wanted to come back and give you a quick presentation to let you know that we've actually heard that feedback, and so we've actually upped our investment in Sooke in particular to address the concerns that we heard from the community around lots of black areas and poor coverage areas. So if the new plan actually calls for 5 carefully sited towers, actually 4 are in the municipality and 1's actually in the Wanda Fuca electoral area just to the northeast. 1 rooftop still in town, and then 1 co-location over in East Sooke. So if we go to the next slide, we've just listed where the current plan shows the new towers, and the rooftop is the Legion building, and the co-location is on an existing tower in East Sooke. This is going to really improve coverage for people not only in the core, but as you start to get to some of the semi-rural areas around Sooke. And in particular, we heard lots of people really hoping to see improved coverage along the Highway 14 corridor between here and the rest of the CRD. It's obviously an important transportation hub, but for safety and other things. So we're working really hard with our radio frequency engineers to ensure that we've got that kind of coverage, and certainly the investments are going to really pay off, I think, for Sooke and for the small businesses. And if we go to the last slide, it'll just give you a representation. So you can see we've added significantly from when we were here before with only 2 towers, and that's really to make sure that citizens, small business, get the kind of coverage and consistent coverage all the way through the town and as they travel throughout the rest of the CRD. So we're really excited, and we really appreciated the fact that being here last time actually generated that kind of feedback, because otherwise we would have ended up with a good plan, but not the kind of investment that I think we've got now that's really going to provide some good choice and options for residents. And so we'll be working closely with staff as we have. They've been terrific, and we just look forward to being in the community, and happy to take any questions now or certainly at any time throughout the process.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Questions from councillors, please, or comments? Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Thanks for the follow-up. I used that Sooke corridor cutoff to get rid of Rick Casper on the phone. So, so that's no longer going to be possible.
Point of order.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
No, I appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate that you've listened to the concerns of the public. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great. Anything else from members of council? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ray, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just can you refresh, where's 6228 Sooke Road? That sounds like it's in our downtown core.
It's just past, I think it's if I remember correctly, or no, 6228, that's, can you go back to the 2 slides? 6228, now where are we here? Yeah, that is, I think, on the, as you're coming into town, there's a property, as I recall, I'm just trying to think of the picture. It was a sort of a light industrial property. It looks like it's a business, and at the back there's some trees, and that's, I think, where we're looking to place. So it would be in the trees and come at the back of some buildings.
The reason I raise it is that we did once before have a proponent looking at putting a tower in our downtown core, and there was quite a bit of pushback because it was right in an area that was going to be developed. So I'm just mindful of the aesthetics and where things are located.
And that's actually the feedback we got originally, which is why the Legion was such an important location for us, because it allows us to just put something on top of a roof discreetly.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just Googled this, and it just depends on if Google is correct or not, but it looks like it's near it's sort of between the high school and the turnoff, the internal access, industrial access road, the turnoff that goes into. Yes, that's what it says here. That's where the pin is drawn.
Yes, I think that's what it is.
in between the two. Sorry, your microphone, please, Councillor.
So is that number one? See, I couldn't see.
Yes,
couldn't
I
read
think
the
that was number one
so
on the
that's
list.
number one, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, it looked like Butler's to me, right?
Yeah.
But,
It looks like
or just in that area.
Yeah.
it's between the two.
Okay.
Yeah,
Looks-
that's, yeah, what I can see on this. Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your
Okay,
Worship.
Thank you for coming in. Okay, our second delegation this evening, we have Mr. Danny Willis from JD's Sunshine Jams and such.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I'm here today to ask about a zoning bylaw. I've submitted a paper to your packages. 7 years ago, my wife and I moved to Sooke and bought a property on Sooke River Road so that we could garden. And when I retired in 2014, we expanded the garden and try and let the garden and the land tell us what we can do, and we've been expanding it. And we also started a business selling jams, jellies, relishes, pickles, and then hot sauces and vinegars. 2014, we started with 8 jams and 2 vinegars, and now we have over 90 products and go to the Sooke Museum Market and a bunch of other markets around town. It's been very successful for us, and we've been very pleased with it, and we've been following all the rules and growing slowly and doing all the steps we need to do. And it's become so successful that it's been problematic in our house that our home kitchen is used up for the business and makes meal times a little difficult. So the expansion has caused us to want to build a second kitchen down in the basement. The second kitchen will also allow us to make it a VHA-approved kitchen, which allows us to expand our products even more and get into more things. The only problem is, according to the Sooke bylaw, we can't have a kitchen because a single-family dwelling house can only have one kitchen. So what I'm asking council to do is look at the bylaw and look at changing that. You can have a second kitchen if you have a suite, but that is like a business. You're renting out property, you change the density of the area, so that's okay. But our home-based business, which isn't changing the density, we are a home-based business licensed in the District of Sooke. We're following all the rules, and one of the rules with VHA is if you want to expand into a VHA license, you can't have it in your home kitchen. So we have to have a second kitchen. But the bylaw says we can't. I don't think the intent of the bylaw was to prevent us from expanding our business. So there is an exception for suites. I'm just asking for that exception to be carried on to a home-based business that requires that. And that is my submission.
Great. Well, thank you very much for bringing this to our attention, and congratulations on your business so that you have been able to expand. I think you're just sort of breaking new ground here, and well, I think that's great. It's unfortunate that this is sort of standing in your way. I know that there's some other businesses in Sooke as well that are seeing really good success in terms of their endeavors as well. So here in council will see it in public on page 9 of the materials, and it's the secondary kitchen. Any comments from council on this? Be looking to trigger a staff report so we can see what we need to do in terms of process. But Councillor Casper, then Loggins, please.
Yes, through you. When were you notified, or when did you find out about this problem, or what?
Well, we applied for a permit on the 26th of February, and it took about 3 weeks in the building department before it became apparent that there was an issue with it. And then we worked with the building inspector, and I met with the acting CEO, Gabriel, about it, and it was suggested the only remedy was to come to council here. And last meeting I was out of town, so I couldn't make it to that meeting, so this is the first meeting I've been able to get to.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Loggins?
Thank you for coming today. As our Mayor Tait did say, it's breaking new ground. We're a new municipality, so it's great to get this information and be able to act on it. And I love your business. It's delicious. So I'm really happy that you're doing well in it. I think the intent of the bylaw, it is to keep things as a single-family dwelling. But also, to your point of the secondary suite allowance with a kitchen, it's something that, to me, triggers a staff report. And I would like to have more information on that and what the growth might look like, because we don't want to trigger too much business growth in a residential area for many reasons. But it's definitely something we could look at to see how we can support small businesses and make sure that they have success in our region. So thanks for bringing that forward.
Okay, other comments or thoughts from members of council? Someone like to make a motion? Any question for staff from Councillor Casper, please?
Yeah, I don't know if staff could answer this, but through you, is it possible to, and perhaps staff could give us a report on it, to bring forward a proposed amendment that could resolve the issue that these people don't want to have a suite, but at the same time provide the opportunity for a secondary kitchen?
Yeah, we could do that. I think we just need a motion to go forward, but I'll go to our CAO first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff are looking for direction from council with respect to making an amendment to our bylaw.
Well, I would so move that staff look into some options that still recognize that a suite would not be permitted, because it's my understanding the people don't want to have a suite, they just want a secondary kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, right now, suites are, if I'm not mistaken, suites are allowable in all zones, right? So this is the case then, it's just to install a kitchen. So there is a kitchen without everything else.
So I so move.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Loggins for discussion. Councillor Loggins, please.
Thank you. I think one of my concerns with the secondary kitchen would be, what does that look like? Does that mean we're going to be employing tons of staff, and this may not be the case with this particular situation, but it may be the case if we just open it up to kitchens in general, that people can start having, a huge kitchen business happening where it's not intended that it should. So it's a tough one, because I think we need to flex it a bit. But I want to see what that looks like, and also have some parameters around it.
And that's why we can get a staff report that will answer those, and we'll get more information on what the best process. So that's basically.
If I could just answer Councillor Loggins.
Sorry, Mr. Willis. I'm just looking at the motion though before we continue the dialogue. Okay. I don't believe, is it a business license amendment?
No, it's a zoning issue.
It's a zoning. On a proposed, I think, right, a zoning bylaw amendment to address Mr. Willis's concerns for a second kitchen. For a secondary kitchen. Is council comfortable in having Mr. Willis answer Ms. Councillor Loggins' question? Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Willis.
Just in your bylaw under home-based business, we'd only employ 2 people. And then we violate the home-based business bylaw. So that wouldn't be beyond that.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. And again, it's not directed at your business, but if we do change the bylaw, then it would be open to everyone. So not necessarily this particular instance, but what would it look like in general?
No, and that makes sense, because as Mr. Willis said, it is a home, and that's where I think we can get those pieces, and then your concern will be addressed. Is this what council has moved? Direct staff to prepare a report on proposed bylaw amendments to address secondary kitchens for home-based businesses. Good. Okay. Further any comments, Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, and through your worship to the CAO, I guess who's taking it. I'm interested in this bylaw that prevents secondary kitchens, because I think that there's homes out there that have enormous, almost commercial-like kitchens in their houses, like depending on their building permits. And I'm pretty sure that there's people who have extra stoves and things in there. So I'm kind of curious about the bylaw, and I was trying to look it up here, but I couldn't quite find out where it says you can't have a secondary kitchen. So,
okay, we'll get all that information, but it's a good point. I think if I understand Mr. Willis correctly, just in terms of where you would like to see your business grow and change, you're looking to install a VHA-approved kitchen. That's so that you can open yourself to other markets, because you would need that to do that. Yep. So that's where certain criteria in this kitchen, as opposed to, I mean, otherwise it's like just build a suite and then use the bedrooms for storage, right? I mean, right? I mean, if you could do that, but in this regard, you're looking for VHA specific and to have everything in alignment.
And the problem with building a suite is there has a lot of other rules, and one of them,
Yes.
I believe, is you have to have separate power.
Yep.
So we got to divide the whole house up, and we don't want to do that. We just want to make some jam.
Yes, and,
Thank you.
and stay on your property, right? So I think that's good. If we could have this, just given the timing, as is the next regular council meeting achievable?
We can make that work.
Okay, great. And at that point, maybe staff will confirm with you that the report's ready, and there'd be an opportunity for you to address council again at that time.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, council. Oh, sorry, we need to vote on the motion. I forgot to do that. I'll call the question, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Councillor Ray. Okay, our next one is 5.3. Ms. Ellen Lures, the Sooke Fall Fair traffic pattern improvements, please.
Thank you. One of our fine volunteers said, Mr. Willis is really in a pickle or in a jam. They're pretty funny people, okay. So because this is a priority for the community, wellness, and I will try to keep it to 5 minutes, but I may have to go over. Each year for the last 30 years that I know of, the Sooke Fall Fairs had Eustis Road closed between the Legion and the Community Hall. We rent the upstairs of the Legion for our art, photography, and literary art sections, thus needed safe access to and from. As well, on Saturdays, the Sooke Country Market is setting up on a closed portion of Eustis from 10 to 2. And on Sunday, we have the pony cart rides, games, vendors, and the ever-popular expanding pet parade. Since the one-way has been installed on Shields Road, we also need to apply for two-way traffic on Shields and one or two-way on Eustis. Last year, we left Shields as a one-way. Eustis became a one-way, and we took traffic out Gatewood to Sooke Road. This seemed logical until we came across the bureaucracy. Staff wasn't sure where the sewer line was on Gatewood or if it was buried deep enough, weren't sure if it was safe, and the trees needed cutting back, and it was being used as a trail. I contacted Eric Large, the owner of the property off Eustis and Gatewood, and asked if we could use this property for parking and then go out Gateway to Highway 14. He was very obliging. Richard Kears, acting on behalf of Mr. Large, had the area cleared and ready for parking and also removed the rock barriers. The part to get access to the highway was painful. It took until the end of August to have this process done, including having a plan drawn up by flaggers, island flaggers, which was to be $400, another cost to us, but I pleaded and Ian drew us up a plan for the highways gratis. We then had to present, I think I still owe him a pie. We then had to present to Highways and District to have them sign off. We also required a goodly amount of signage, which we're always able to get from the district, with a $100 deposit, which we had already given when we put in our permit. At the end of August, our permit finally ready. We were told there was no equipment, safety equipment, or barriers available for us. Totally took us by surprise. Another spin, which fortunately, Main Road helped us out with great kindness. Getting flaggers is the most difficult thing to do. It took us almost all season to get the flaggers happening. We were stopping and getting out and asking flaggers if they would be interested in flagging for a stipend, as we couldn't pay a wage as our insurance would go up too high. There weren't flaggers around, as they're all very busy. When we finally got our 4, but then one got called out to work halfway through, and we just managed. But the flaggers didn't get time off, and we were running food and water out to them and relieving them for bathroom breaks at a cost of $600. Now, you see already we could have added another $1,000 very easily of volunteer work to get this money. The year before, I was flagging until the flaggers could arrive. All this is very time-consuming and exhausting, and it makes it very difficult to get volunteers involved when we're facing this kind of frustration. I know that the Legion, with their larger events, suffer the same issues as do all the events at the community hall. I had a call from the Sooke Country Market, as they too would like to close Eustis and have market on Saturdays, and I explained the difficulty they would need ticketed flaggers and that there's a cost involved. Our fair is getting bigger, and we want to be able to accommodate the traveling public. There's also the difficulty attached to vehicles turning onto Eustis from Otter Point Road and angled parking in front of the Legion, and then trying to turn around and go back down Eustis to Otter Point. We've all seen that. It's painful. If they could just go straight out to Gatewood, to Grant, it too would reduce the frustration. Folks coming from the Legion too could turn right and right again on Grant, right again to Grant. We understand how Shields is too narrow for a two-way, so there needs to be a compensation for this to be a priority. We received accolades from the businesses in the area for managing the traffic so well last year. One business owner called and asked me to stop by. I thought I was in for a dressing down, because it's happened before, but instead was giving a lovely bouquet of flowers. The shopping centre wasn't full of cars, and the businesses on Shields could function in a normal manner. One of the businesses was kind enough to give us their lot for handicap parking. We at the Fall Fair are making a request for Greatwood, a designated roadway in Sooke, to be completed from Eustis to Grant. This road is part-way paved and has a number of homes to the west and apartment or townhouses to the east. The staff is asking for some of the roads to be updated and repaired. We are asking that this road be given a priority one to alleviate the traffic woes and to help out the tired volunteers and take a big load off our shoulders and make the traffic flow in a fluid manner. We'd also ask that any development on Ayre Road or Eustis Road would look at the larger picture of providing access through from the Legion area of the back to flow out to Eustis and then on to Grant. As a large property comes up for development, the entire egress from the can be addressed, but each part should be a part of the larger. Gatewood is a designated roadway, so please, for the sake of event and non-profit groups and for the profitability for the Sooke Community Hall and for the Legion, using this area, give us an easy egress. If it's not possible to get the road to regular use at this time, please upgrade the potholes on Gatewood, cut down the broom and the blackberries, and put a gate which only requires a key to open, not a machine to remove and replace the rocks. That was really a painful thing for us because we couldn't even get a machine to put the rocks back. Kind regards on behalf of the Sooke Fall Fair celebrating its 104th year, and our theme, Something Fishy at the Sooke Fall Fair, celebrating Canada 150.
Thank you very much.
Do you have
Ms.
any
Lewis.
questions?
Questions from Council. Councillor Ray, please.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. And just more of a comment. Last term, that was something that I had spoken about, trying to create more and better movement within the District of Sooke. That was one of the roads. But, of course, you have to prioritize, and one of the ones that we were looking at was on the south side of Sooke Road. But you get no argument from me. I think it's a great idea. And I think it certainly would assist people moving around the Community Association, Mum's Restaurant, the Legion, and that whole area, I think, needs better egress from it. So you have my support.
Thank you.
Other comments or motion or something? Councillor Pearson, please.
Yes, through the chair to you. So Ms. Lewis, so the way I understand the way that you did it last year, if we put a gate down where the rocks are, because I mean, I don't know if we got enough money to do the other, but so if we put a gate where the rocks are on Gatewood at the bottom of the left, right?
This is to the right, because going the highways way is, if we go to towards the highway on Gatewood,
Yeah.
we're talking about taking Gatewood to Grant.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Okay.
but in the short term, if we couldn't get it to paved or up to highways, if we just simply installed a gate that we could open the gate, that would be eliminate a lot of stuff.
Not really, because the road, I did call in before we put our permit in, as we're asked to do, and they said, well, send in the permit and then we'll deal with it. But last year I did that in January, and it wasn't until August 28th till we got our permit, with a lot of back and forth. So what I understand is that Gatewood, and I walked down it as well, there's so many branches, there's a broom and everything, and it's closed over the trail, so that all has to be brush cut, or all has to be cut down. And then there's potholes in there that you'd bottom out on, so it has to be graded and gravelled. So if that was done, and then there'd have to be, what we would like to have is a three-way stop or some kind of stop, because again, we'd have to have flaggers on the end.
So, okay, so you've jumped ahead to where I was going. So I'm thinking if we put a temporary, and I don't know what our engineering department would say, is if we put a temporary three-way stop at the bottom of Eustis and Gatewood, right, where the apartment is, and then turn right to go up the hill, correct? So if we had a three-way stop there, that would eliminate, and then a stop sign going onto Grant Road, right, a temporary stop sign. So that would eliminate the need for flaggers, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
I think.
Okay, and because I'm following along with what you said. So I think there's some solutions there. I want to comment is that last year it worked wonderful. So I'd like to build on the success from last year. Like I say, financially, I don't know if we're ready to put that road to complete service between there and there. But anyways, I think if we put stop signs, a three-way stop and a one-way stop, even if they're temporary, I think that would work. But I would have to defer that to our engineering staff.
We would need a report to our CAO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillors Pearson and Ray. I think that staff would be happy to work with Ms. Lewis to get a report done for Council's consideration. Part of the thing we also have to take into consideration is any amendments to our budget that might occur as a result of this. I know that we're going through an exercise with a consultant to prioritize the roads that need the most attention in the district this year. And we are certainly happy to include that in the consideration coming back to Council.
Okay. Councillor Casper, please.
Well, is it, through you, is it possible in the interim, though, to have, I know staff are very busy, to have staff, again, as our CEO mentioned, work with Mrs. Lures and anyone else to see if we can make use of their services to start hacking down the broom and to sort of get the ball rolling to see what we've got up there. And then it gives everybody a better picture in a quicker fashion.
Yeah, we just need a report to come back. What I think staff requires is council star action. Have a report come back. It could outline some preliminary costs and the like. And then if council needs to pass a budget amendment, we can look at,
but
we
if
can
I
give
just
that
may,
due consideration.
if I just may, I don't want to see, and I think Councillor Pearson alluded to this, that we don't want a big overblown project here.
But we need something to come back to council.
I agree, but my expectation is I don't want to see this be part of a big mega project, part of the $1 million.
No, what I'm saying, Councillor Casper, is we would get a report. We could see, given Ms. Lures knows that area very well, what's involved in the brushes and getting all that done, and then it could just be a small budget amendment, separate or not, depending. But we'll get a report first.
But if I may, just
May I help you a little bit with this?
We need a budget. We need an actual report, right?
But just to add on this is that we've made use of volunteers to do other projects in Sooke, i.e. a trail from Horn Road, correct?
Yeah, so we can get a report and look at those things.
We've already opened the door, and I think I hear, without saying it, there's an opportunity there, right?
Yes, and as volunteers, we did open up, we did get other people to volunteer, and we did open it up the other way, all the way to the highway. We cut that all down, got that all cleaned up, marked, etc. But
And that's
now,
why going.
But we're running out of volunteers. We're tired.
And that's why going back to what Councillor Pearson said, the idea is that staff would work with you. In terms of broom, we'd have to move sooner rather than later in terms of removing it at the right time. Councillor Pearson, please, and our CAO.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we defer this back to staff to get us a report, but with one thing.
Can you complete the motion
Okay, yep.
and then have a seconder?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we defer this back to staff for a report back on options, or to work with Mrs. Lewis on options for the fall fair access.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, but would it not be for any community activities
Yes,
that would
please.
occur there? So as
Yeah.
opposed,
Well,
potentially, right, if the Legion had a large fundraising, whatever, and would need, I'm just
Any
thinking-
community event.
Yes.
Yeah, if you could amend it.
And yeah, the purpose of my motion is just to make sure that it's ready for fall fair, because I heard you say last year you made an application in January and it took till August. So my recommendation is to work with you to make it secure for the fall fair. Other people can come along and do
Right.
whatever, take advantage of your good work. How's that?
But if I may, the country market starts up usually in May, and they too have got an issue.
Yes. No, my intent, to clarify, Councillor Pearson, was it's not just to do something for one event that occurs one time a year, but obviously to take that into note. To our CAO, then to Councillor Ray, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to note that, we have brand new park staff joining the district as auxiliaries this year. I know that we've come up with a work plan for them that did not anticipate this work, so some other things might have to go, as a lesser priority. So part of the report we'll bring back is that list of what we think are priorities, what we think this is going to cost, and the staff time involved. So we'll give you a full set of options and dollars for consideration.
Does the motion stated capture what your intent was, Councillor? Mover in second?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Ray, please.
I'm just wondering, Councillor Pearson, if you want to make a reference to the actual Gateway Road?
Yes.
No? Okay.
Because I think we all understand it.
Yeah.
But-
The intent was for it to be from Eustis to Grant.
Eustis
Eustis to
through,
Gatewood to-
through Gatewood to Grant.
To Grant, yes.
I think that needs to be clear, because that was a tough issue, because like I said before, the problem was, actually I've been working on this for 3 years to get it through on Gatewood, and it was because I was told that they didn't know the sewer line was buried, they didn't
Yes.
know how deep it was, blah, blah, blah.
Thank
So
you,
it
Ms.
took a
Lewis.
lot of work to just get it to that point.
Thank you. We're on the motion now. It belongs to council.
Oh. Good.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It just reminds me of the work that was done with the Community Association when they were clearing the area of across the road from the fields to create parking. It wasn't anything fancy, but it certainly did the trick for providing that parking. So,
Actually, that was, yes, the Community Association helped out, a member helped us out, but that was the initiative of Sooke Fall Fair to get that done.
Okay, I'd like to stay on the motion here, please. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Lewis, for bringing that idea forward. Okay, 5.4, please. That's 6717 and 6723 Ayre Road. Mr. John Selesky. Okay, welcome, please. If you could please turn on the microphone, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just purchased 2 properties in Sooke last week, 6723 and 6717 Ayre Road. And I also found out last week that there was an order or a notice from Council to clean up those properties. And I found that out just after I purchased the properties. So actually I've put in a demolition for 6723 Ayre Road. So I'm going through that process. So I'm here to ask for an extension on the cleanup order. I haven't seen what it is that Council has asked for, but I understand that it's going to expire fairly soon. And so I have a demolition permit request in right now, and I'm working through that. So I'm just looking for an extension on the cleanup, and I also wanted to let Council know that not only do I plan to clean up the properties, but I plan to demo the properties as well. I think it's important that Council is aware that I'm looking at demoing them. They're a real eyesore. I think everybody would agree that in town that's aware of them. So 6723, on the demolition permit application, I have some dates on there. I think the dates are a little bit modified from what I've put in, talking to the different people doing the work. The remediation is happening tomorrow, and then it takes 10 days for that report. And then the abatement company is going to go in around the 20th of April, and then they would start their work. And that would take approximately a week to 10 days, so it would be the end of April. And then after that would be the demo part. So I'd be looking at an extension till probably, maybe I can get it done by the end of April, but I'd like an extension till mid-May.
Questions from Councillor Ray, and then Casper? Or pardon me, Councillor Pearson.
Different Ray. Through the chair to you, to Mr. Selensky.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've got a plan in process. I have no problem supporting an extension, although I would like to be respectful to our bylaw enforcement officers. Okay, so I'll make a motion to grant you the extension that you've had to, and you said till the middle of May?
Middle of May, yeah.
Would you like it to the end of May?
Sure. Why
There
not?
is we will be dealing with this right after, as there's a report
Okay,
as
yeah.
well. So I think we can deal with it when we go through that report,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
And I've also put in a rezoning application for those properties as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. You okay with that? Because it is the next item.
Just so
on
you're
the
aware,
agenda.
it's 6723. I have a demo application in now. The other property, we're going to clean up the yard as best as we can, but not demo it until we get rezoning. There are tenants in that property.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay, you're fine, Councillor
that's good.
Casper?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Are there
So
any
good
more
luck.
questions from Mr. Selesky? Perhaps when we get into the report, if there's anything that triggers, we'll invite you back to comment when we go through that, because it's already been moved to be the next item of business that we deal with.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we did move this just after, so turn council's attention please to 9.2, which for members in the audience, it's page 63. Our staff here have put together this report. There was a recommendation here that it be till April 28th, but this is where with the delegation there was a request to have it go longer than that, till the end of May. Our Bylaw Enforcement Officer is here, so we'll just get some. Is there any more comments to add in addition to what the written report states?
Your Worship, I don't have anything to add that the current property owner hasn't stated. As far as my office is concerned, I'm wholly supportive of the extension until the end of May.
Okay, and it seems, as we heard, a very clear timeline, and it's just getting everything in place there. Questions from council? Is there anything for staff? Okay, Councillor Pearson, would you like to make your motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion that we grant the extension as recommended till the end of May 2017.
Okay, there is one posted. Are you comfortable with what's stated on the screen in front of us here? That council grant an extension till May
Yes.
31st regarding remedial action to 6723 to provide the new property owner an opportunity to comply with unsightly premises and
Yes.
objectable. Okay, good. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ray. Any further comments on the motion? No, it's great to see this all come forward, and we look forward to rezoning in due course on the other property. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so then that's done. We'll move into our public question and comment period. This item, or this time here, is specific to any items that are on tonight's agenda specifically, and there is a 2-minute time frame per comment. And if you could please state your name and address for the record, and as well just let us know which item of business you'd like to discuss so that we can get to the appropriate part in the agenda, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Terrence Martin, 6517 Stonewood Drive. I see that the report on the Sun River Seniors Village is on the agenda at page 71. What I don't see in there is any rational explanation as to why we're allowing a gated community at all in Sooke, much less obstruct the new park down there. I can't help but wonder what Whiff and Spit would look like if we allowed a gated community to go in front of that and made everybody park a half a kilometer up the road. It makes no sense whatsoever. I'd also point out that section 4.12.3.u of the official community plan, just look up the language here, says increase public access to fresh water and salt water for swimming and fishing opportunities. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's nothing in this report that even indicates that's a gated community, and yet the gate posts are set in literally in stone right behind the front entrance. Makes reference to additional parking. Again, that parking is well over half a kilometer from the river. So it doesn't really do anything. There's some language about topography, geotech, environmental, and archaeological concerns in the same sentence as the public interest. But frankly, I don't see how any of that even applies. The topography is obviously not an issue because there's an existing road grade there for precisely the reason that that's where you would put a road if you were going to do it. It's part of the old farm. There's no geotechnical issues at all. Can't see environmental. Possibly archaeological, but haven't seen an archaeological report, and archaeological reports are due course with any development, and certainly a small road into a park wouldn't imply any huge considerations there. So I'd like to see council take a look at this. It's going to be a lost opportunity if it's not done now. It is a provision of the Land Title Act, Section 75. There's reference in the report that the approving officer is the sole authority. I'm assuming that implies subordinate to the will of council. I don't see the approving officer running the municipality. And I also don't see the provisions in Section 75 and 76 that have been stated have been met. There's very specific relief provisions in the provincial enactment that don't apply.
Thank you, Mr.
So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, and many of us were here also in the open mic sessions and have that background in your materials. So we'll address that when we get to the relevant report.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Gail Hall, 2517 Sooke River Road. I would like to speak to number 9.3 in the turf field project and whether or not we should have contractual conditions such and so. I'll come back to what I've said several times, and that's the $400,000 money that we got from Sun River is included in this turf field project. And the agreement that I have here, and I've said this before, is that this is the agreement with the district and Sun River for the property that we took up in where we were going to put playing fields. Okay, not less than 7 days before the closing date, Sun River shall provide the municipality with a one-time payment of $400,000 for the planning, design, and construction of the district lands. And in this agreement, the district lands are the lands that we've got up in the middle that I think we've now zoned residential, but which need to be remediated because they've got, I don't know how many feet of junk. And that's why we got the $400,000, and it cannot be used on the playing fields. So there's that. And then, if I can quickly get this in here, I was surprised to find that the playing fields have on them a restricted covenant from 1981, and to preserve the amenity enjoyed by restricting the use. So it's not open to the public, and because it's got that covenant and it's been followed, the writer of this staff report, and it is an excellent report, as a result of the community use covenant, the Sooke Community Association has benefited from full municipal tax relief on this property and others since 1980s. So there's the question here, should public, and he's got this in here, but I haven't got time to read it to you. He's asking the question, should we be putting public money into these parks when, in fact, they are closed to many members of the public? And this is a very excellent report, probably the best staff report I've seen. And it has on it our Director of Development Services is the signature. And it's a great report, and I think you should consider it before the $700,000 goes on that property. If it's not open to the public, then it's not public property.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hall. And we can get those answers when we get to that section 9.3. Other comments or questions from members of the public, please?
Ellen Lewis, 5526 Sooke Road. I just had a question with the financial plan being decided on tonight, because I believe in the paper it said in the Sooke News Mirror that there'd be an open house at April 20 at the Rotary, and then people would be able to comment on the financial plan. And I found it kind of strange. Well, why comment after it's already passed? Just a question, doesn't make much sense. And I really would have hoped that there'd be more open time for people. I know that there was the opportunity very quickly, and the 2 minutes isn't really long enough to go through, and the answers didn't all come out either to the questions. So I think it would be better to really have an open house and hear from people better before this was approved. Thank you.
Thank you for that idea, Councillor Lewis. Ms. Lewis, thank you. Other comments from members of the public, please, if there's any? I'll call for a second time. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, and we will move into our agenda here. Our first item up is 8.1, and it's the 2017-20 to 21 5-year financial plan bylaw. The recommendation here is that bylaw 664 5-year financial plan bylaw 2017 be adopted. I see a hand up from our corporate officer. I'm wondering.
Yes, Your Worship. We have on the agenda under point 7, the public input meeting and related reports. We just did public question and comment period, and now we're going into public input.
Oh, I see. Okay, pardon me. Okay, so sorry that I missed that. So this is an opportunity then to hear further comments on the 5-year financial plan prior to council adopting it. So it's a separate public input session. Okay. Sorry, I see that it's printed there, and I reviewed my agenda. I just didn't catch that. So is there any further comments from members of the public on this? Come on down or up, please.
I just have a question, because I don't know that there was in the paper or any announcement to say that there'd be an opportunity to speak to the financial plan tonight at the meeting.
Can I ask how this may have been communicated out from staff? Or from staff via communication means? How was this noticed?
Yes, Your Worship. The Section 66, as it states here, requires a public consultation process, although that process is not defined by the community charter, and there is no stipulation about having to advertise for it in the paper. So throughout the process of the 5-year financial plan, during our special budget meetings, we did have opportunity for public input during those meetings. As well, we've communicated that this event would occur on this day tonight, their final consultation process, and it was put onto our website on March 31st, so it's been up there since then.
Okay, so that might be something for council to consider as we sort of what we wanted to see was our 5-year financial planning begin earlier, and there was sort of a commitment that we would do it earlier in the year, is that we actually look at how we communicate out that we're doing this, because unless you actually look at the website all the time, you might not even notice that it's there.
Exactly. And
right? So just in terms of improving that, have some sort of an open house that runs day and night. It's something that was raised earlier in the open forum session, and I think it's a good idea. So.
Well, yes, if we're going to have transparency and if you want to have public input, I know people don't come to the meetings. We all know that, but
sometimes
council,
they do.
Sometimes they do,
Yeah.
but council needs, I thought it was a good idea to have it at the Rotary, because there's a lot of people there and people will speak more freely. We've seen that many times. And it gives opportunity for more people, because now you're going to the people and the people have an opportunity to talk to you. And especially if there's a variety of people there that are willing to listen and take the comments. And then look at it again. If people are not happy, if they look at it and see they're not happy, then maybe they'll come to a meeting. But anyway, I think it needs to be better publicized.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lors.
Gail Hall, 2517 Sooke River Road. I've got some questions about certain expenditures that I think have been forgotten along the way somewhere. And I think they're very important, so I think you need to maybe look at them. From the Land Commission, We have the, when the change in the properties was made, so that we took the middle part up there, and they, at that point, took from the big one down at the bottom,
I'm sorry, Ms. Hall, I'm not,
that,
we're
Corner
okay, we're
piece
talking
down there.
about Sun River.
yes, down in Sun River. That piece down there is still considered park by most people. They took the park, they said the park must come off of that and it will be entirely farm use only. That's that piece down there, the big one. So it is no longer a park as far as the Land Commission is concerned. And I'm sorry that I did not bring the document, but I can bring it in tomorrow and pump it on somebody's desk. The important part here is that they also, and I do have that one, that on that piece, you're required to put a buffer. The entire length of this, you're required to put a buffer that will be 5 meters wide from your parkland trail inward, 5 meters wide, and as I recall, 1.8 meters high page wire fence, and you must plant.
Is this for the budget, though?
Well, it'll have to be in the budget because you had 3 years to do it, and you are in your 3rd year now. And if you don't do it, they've also put in their letter that the whole thing will be reversed.
So this is okay, so I guess your question in terms of how it relates to the 5-year financial plan
you need to spend that
where
money.
Have we allocated this buffer and fencing in the financial plan?
That's right.
Okay.
And there's not just that one, but you're also going to have to buffer between your property up in here, in the middle, Sun River, and the ALR that's there. So you've got 2 properties that need buffering. This is the big one because this goes from here all the way back to here. And it's going to cost.
So is that the question then to staff? Is this something that is being dealt with by the developer of the lands, or are there plans in the district office? This is a district responsibility?
This belongs to the District of Sooke.
Okay.
This is the document. The transfer or is the District of Sooke, and you're the one that's got to put up the buffer, and that's been there for 3 years now, and nobody's ever touched it. I've raised it enough times that my hair is falling out because your 3-year term is up this year.
To do this,
and
required to meet the requirements of the LC.
They have said that if it's not done within the 3 years, the whole thing that you had to do is not done within the 3 years, you may have to make a new presentation for the whole thing. So it's important, but there's other money things too that have been forgotten along the way. The $400,000 is one, and I've already dealt with that one. We purchased the property on Sooke River Road for, I think it was $765,000 or something. Now, a good chunk of that came from park reserve funds. It is not a park yet. It's still in, I believe it's agriculture zoned or something. It's not a park. The whole thing would have to be a park for this to apply, and you took money from the park reserve fund to buy it. Now, I'm not sure whether the whole $765,000 came from there, but we sold all those small parks. I think it's possible that there was 300 and some thousand came from the Parks Fund, but I'm not sure. I haven't got the documents. That also has to go back because it's not a park. You can't use Park Reserve Fund money unless you have a park, buy a park. So there's that money. And those are the 2 big ones. But the buffer is going to cost, by the time you figure in your labor and equipment and everything to get down in there to build that, that's going to be a costly thing, and they have been very definite in their requirement that it be done. So that's the big one. The other one that I keep wondering about is where in this 5-year plan do we find where credit cards are used? Like, I can't find anything that would tell me what's been done with credit cards and such, because I can't find where it shows up anywhere in the 5-year documents. And I'm also bothered by the $150,000 contingency fund to go over to the CAO's office. When that money is going to be used, does council approve it? Do they have to be, those funds have to be approved?
It's similar. I was going to have your questions and then get answers, but maybe I'll just jump in on this one. Last year is an example, and what council's desire is we had put a certain amount of funds into our council contingency.
Right.
And then when we received a report from our interim fire chief, we shifted by resolution the funds over from council's contingency to the fire department to cover off those after receiving a report and a resolution. So council going forward would like to see that occur, that there would be some form of a report that would come to staff that council can vet, and then we would transfer to the appropriate account by resolution. We made a motion, or we set something to that effect, that is our expectation.
I mean, because let's go back a step. There was a lot of dollars went out without any approval. I mean, we know that. And
we don't want to repeat that.
No, well, that's what I'm concerned about.
And that's why that was the direction set by council, that we have that for operating contingency, but then council would like to see how those funds are spent, and resolution would be made to that effect.
So if council has to approve them, why then would the contingency fund not belong to council? I mean, why would it not be?
Because it fits in, I mean, the decision was that it fit under operating contingency for the CAO. And so I think that's how it was presented, and council was comfortable with it, provided we receive a report and can then direct a resolution.
So the dollars will be approved by council before spent?
Yes.
I feel better.
I think everyone does. So that was why how it was presented, and then council gave approval, and this was the direction and how we gave approval. We gave consent based that's how that would go.
So go back a minute into that, the $700,000 for the playing fields, and because of this very excellent staff report, I'm concerned that, mind you, he does.
There's a point of order. There is no time limit on this for budget.
Mr. Howitt wrote this. I don't have any problem using his name. It's an excellent report. He does recommend that this was for the exclusion portion, and he's not, going head over heels over this thing, but I think it's important that this is not a piece of public land, and that they restrict public and community access. And that's, when you think about it, we're putting in $700,000 for what? If the ordinary public can't use the land, I don't think that we should be putting that kind of money into it. And particularly the $400,000, because it is definitely meant to remediate those lands in Sun River. And so I would like that looked at, and I think these are important, and particularly that one with the buffer, because you could see that whole, and I've got the document, I just didn't bring it, where the Land Commission clearly says you've got 3 years to complete this, or you may have to put in a new application, and that means the whole thing's got to go back. The land you took out in the middle that was ALR And the fact that this is no longer a park down on the river, nobody seems to understand that, but it is not a park any longer. It is farm use only. And I'll bring that document in if somebody wants me to bring it in tomorrow, because I do have it. I just forgot it. Getting old.
No, that would be appreciated, Ms. Hall. Just to go backwards, we'll talk about the playing fields in the Sun River section. I think that would work. And maybe our Director of Finance could comment in terms of the question about credit card payments and expenditures, and how that is reflected in the finance, like how it's tracked or reflected in the 5-year finance.
Yes, Your Worship. Credit card expenses are in all the total of expenses. It's just another form. Instead of using a check, we're using credit card. So there isn't a line that says credit card expenses, but there's not a line that says check expenses either. There's just maybe a line that says professional development, but that might be paid either by credit card or check. Sometimes we can't use check. It has to be by credit card.
Okay, and that's where when we receive sort of our budget to actuals report, and we would see, or like our quarterly reports that council would like to see what our actuals in terms of expenses are, we would see a total in, we'll say council stipend, for example, what our year-to-date is. Maybe that's not a good example. Council conferences, where there would be checks to reimburse councillors for expenses, and then there would also be credit card transactions for hotel or flight bookings. Then that would be reflected in the actuals, and then your forecasting when you do your budget is what we sort of anticipate our expenses for the year to be. So it doesn't necessarily show up in the plan per se, but it would show up total in the budget to actuals report.
Okay, because I know I shouldn't read, but I was reading where municipal governments are paying out a lot of money for credit card use in, is it called transition fees or something? That every time the credit card is used, the municipality also has to pay some kind of a fee?
I think that's where if we accepted credit cards for property tax payments, which we don't right now, we only accept, it's indirect, I believe. I don't think you can pay your property taxes by Visa. If we did, we would pay a transaction fee of a certain percentage of whatever that total is. But 2.5, whatever is, it can be negotiated, but we only accept payment to be by debit card.
Okay.
So that fee, there is no, maybe it's a different fee?
Not on the debit card.
Yes, Your Worship. There is the, like the credit card companies charge a fee to use the card. So we are paying an admin fee for that privilege. We don't incur interest because we make sure they're paid on time. But there is, and yeah, if there were taxes collected that way, there definitely would be fees that would need to be passed on to the third parties.
So
right, but we don't accept.
We're not paying fees at all?
No, unless we didn't pay our credit card bill on time, we would pay interest.
No, yeah,
but in terms of transactions for folks coming in to pay with, they can't pay with Visa anyway, so it doesn't apply. It would be a debit card. We would pay a handling, as you say, a handling fee to provide that service, but it is a common form of payment now, I suppose.
But I do think there's a couple of really serious things here that have been overlooked and maybe need to be looked at, because that buffer for sure, because you could back up the whole process back all the way. And,
we need some information on that from staff. I'm aware if you go along Sun River Way and there's the agricultural lands and then there's ours, there is a fence there and what looks like a hard packed surface, and then there's the cul-de-sac of the new development that's under construction now, and then I could see eventually then it kind of goes like this, and then there's residences with new build there, but I think just in light of this, I don't know if there was any comment from staff at this time on that buffer and how we're planning for that to our finance director.
Yes, Your Worship. I know our Director of Development Services has is aware of this issue, and I've overheard the discussion of buffers, and I think in that one area you were just mentioning that there is a bit of buffering already, if not the full part. But I think we need the Director of Development Services to be able to come back either with a report or information at the next meeting.
Okay.
There's what they want on the Sun River Nature Trail. There's the buffer that they want.
Okay, so I think in this
5 meters
regard,
wide.
Ms. Hall, we'll get I think council will be looking for a different update that would cover that.
Okay.
And then I guess if there is a comment from staff, please, just in terms of when funds are used to acquire the park, the requirement for monies to be transferred back into the reserve.
Yes, Your Worship. So the reserve does require that only monies that we receive from selling park go into the reserve, and then that reserve can only be used for acquiring park. So, this one, the Sun River ones, went into a Plainfield Reserve Fund, and so that was created at the time of the Sun River agreement, and I'll need to dig into that again to see, but our Director of Development Services will be aware of it all too.
I guess my question, though, is that in the case of Sooke River Road Park, we used sold off parks to acquire funds to purchase that property. Mm-hmm. Does the park reserve count need to be replenished then?
Yes.
To recover for what was taken out to acquire that park?
Yes, Your Worship. If monies in the park fund are meant for parks. Right. So I think I wasn't here then, so we'll have to look back and see what all transpired at that time regarding the definition of parks and whether there was any lawyers involved. I'm sure there was some advice sought at the time.
Okay. Councillor Pearson?
And Ms. Hall's exactly correct on that parks fund. I believe we made a motion somewhere in 2013 to approach the ALR about converting that to a park, because that would eliminate the need to pay that back to the parks fund. But it's always been sitting there. She's 100% correct that it's an ALR land, and I believe I'm not sure exactly what the zoning is on it, but it's
RU3, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, but a park is permitted in ALR land, but we have to go through the steps of declaring it a park and go through the public process of that. And I think somewhere in history there's a motion that we passed in here to start that proceeding.
Yeah. So we'll need to.
I think it was.
Took you a long time.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was at your recommendation.
Probably.
Yeah. Councillor Casper, do you have more?
Yeah. Well, I dragged out the zoning map, and part of the property is zoned RU3, and part of it is zoned RU2.
Yeah.
Right.
So a portion of it would you wouldn't have had any consent from the Land Commission, but on the I'm assuming it may be the larger portion where you would have had approvals from the Land Commission to create it as a park use or make it park use. But our zoning bylaw permits parks in all zones.
But
So we're covered that way. But I know that it was roughly 300,000, and then the remainder came from other sources, and it was paid off over a 2-year period of time. And they did the down payment, I think, with the Park Reserve Fund. But it took 3 years, and I wasn't on council, but when I read the history, and I'm sure Mayor Tait.
Well, I was on
there
council, but I don't remember every details of the process. But I think if there's a motion that's outstanding, we need to look that up. And if it's outstanding, we need to address it so that this matter is resolved, because it does keep coming up and it needs to be properly bookended in some way. So we'll have that looked at.
I've spoken to the Land Commission about that section in our zoning bylaw that says, what is it, that you can have a park in any zone or something? The answer from the Land Commission is not in ALR land. So
we'll clarify that, because I did hear that from the same thing from staff, so we'll get that. We should just bookend that, and then, okay.
Thank you
Ms.
for the
Hall.
time.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
Are there other comments on the 5-year financial plan?
I just wanted to clarify something that Mrs. Hall said about the land that with the ALR abutting the ALR land, and I recall that as well because we made a lot of comments about that because a buffer zone had to be put in there, and it was not done, and that's part of that letter that you have from me is part of that man that has that property that has ALR land there. He's told me that the people from Sun River come up onto his property, they dump garbage onto their property, on his property. There is not a proper buffering zone there. There's no fencing there.
Okay, well, we need our Director of Development Services to come back to council with some info on that. Are there any other members of the public that have comments on the 5-year financial plan? Call for a second and final time. Okay, thank you. I'll then turn to council, please. There is a recommendation. It is that bylaw number 664, 5-year financial plan, bylaw 2017, be adopted.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Casper. Councillor Pearson, you have a comment?
Well, you know, and I think we've done a good job with the financial report coming forward. I think I've heard some comments through the public. There's a couple of things that have, happened over the last year or two that I think that we need to address before we adopt this financial plan. One of them is I think that we need to have clarity. We heard it tonight on any contracts that are, and I want to say an arbitrary amount of $25,000, that we get those, that a report back to council for approval, so that there's an opportunity for the public to see that, so that we have an opportunity as councillors to see anything that's out there. So,
sorry, can I get clarity on what you're asking? So, contracts that are higher than 25,000,
yes,
you want council to approve them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, how does that work with our purchasing policy right now?
What's that?
Or delegated authorities.
There's delegated authority staff up to 75,000.
I'm talking about contracts, so that when we go into a contract negotiation, so we have numerous contracts that are going out there, and what's happened is that, and it's been fed to me several times, and I'm just putting it out there for discussion, and I'm prepared to make a motion to it, so that council can have opportunity to sort of follow along with my way of thinking, because I have two things that I wanted to talk about. Is that I've heard it several times that we need to have clarity on what we're spending, and I think we've heard it, and I don't want to go rehash things. Amend before we spend, right, has been told a few times. So I'm happy with the financial plan. I know there's a tax increase, and I think we're doing some really good things with it. But I think that I'd like to see some more rigor around that process. That's what I'm thinking. So.
Okay, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, wrong button. No, we have a motion on the floor, so you can't make one just yet. But what I was wanting to do after council adopted it is I think council needs to have a conversation on expectations and delivery after. So I think everybody around that, I think it's almost something that should be done at a committee of the whole because it needs discussion. You've raised some items. We've talked about the 150,000, the operating contingency, council's expectation. An item for myself is, say, advertising. How are we communicating? What sort of ads are we looking at doing? There's also any sort of events. We have funds for events, say. How are we going to deliver on those events so that it's not a last-minute scramble at the end? And some other things that are in it so that we just have an understanding of how we're delivering this and then how we communicate out to the public. When we know that we'll be getting a report back on the roads, how then do we want, when the roads, let's say, are selected, how are we wanting to deliver these roads and the time? What do you want to see done? Is something on the website sufficient? Is it the case of, is there notices handed out to residents that live on that street? Like, what are we doing exactly when these things roll out? At the same time, giving staff the ability to do their work without hitting undue barriers. We have sprinkler work happening in the building. How are we creating a safe work environment for staff while there's old piping and the like has come out? When is that being done? Is the office being closed? Is certain things, the fire hall is going to be painted? How does that impact service delivery? Like, there's a lot of pieces, I think, once that we have that we need to answer, and I think it might be good to have at a committee of the whole, and then also looking at the policies so that we understand in terms of your concern, but also staff, and they also have been given delegated authority for spending. So what is that we're looking at doing? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. It's just that we've got a motion on the floor.
Yes.
To approve the 5-year financial budget, and I think that my opportunity to say that I want some things in place and some controls in place, so that we don't have a spend before we amend. Yes. Because that doesn't give comfort to the people who pay the taxes in our town, and say that, you know what, we spent this money, and I recognize things come along, and it's about that sense of that we're minding the store, and that's I want that message to go out there.
And I agree with you, and I think it's also to get what sort of reports does council expect? So that means we as a council decide we want this report, because staff cannot deliver 7 different reports to meet each councillor's individual expectations. We need to come together and say council wants to see this kind of a report, and what does that look like? And that's why I think we need to have a broader discussion on what our expectations are, so that staff isn't responding to an email that, we need to really define that. And I don't think any of us want to sit through a budget amendment like we did last year. Okay? And staff knows that. We've said it to them maybe not a million, but many times we've communicated that. Councillor Casper.
Well, once we approve this budget, then or adopt it, then perhaps Councillor Pearson may want to make a motion to give some direction. The only reason I'm suggesting that is because I'm strongly recommending we go to our past practice. All contracts over $25,000 come back to council with written reports and for council approval, so that we don't find ourselves out there questioning what's going on. And because our budget does not clearly identify all the specifics around the contracts. And that's something I talked about. And, I would look for comment from our Director of Finance. He's the individual in charge, but I don't want to put him on the spot. But once we adopt the budget, perhaps we could have a further discussion.
Okay. Well, our point of clarity, our CAO is actually in charge of municipal office. But I just jumped in because Councillor Pearson, and I'm totally open to him making a motion, but you can't make a motion when we have one on the floor, and we're talking about the budget being adopted.
Sorry. And the point of me making that motion is that we right now have in front of us our 5-year financial plan, including next year's budget. So if I don't say something before it, it's a redundant point, right? So I'm saying
it isn't.
Well, to me, it feels like it is that you have to say, okay, because for all the people that are out there watching, they have to understand is that we're watching the store, and that's the message that I want to send to our taxpayers. So, anyways, that's all.
Yes, no, absolutely, and I
agree.
It
was not meant as anything. So, our staff does a fantastic job, and that's the point. Is that I want to say is that we've got your back in the decision making process, and that's where I was kind of coming from.
Councillor Loggins.
Sorry, a bit of a change of pace, but still budget related. I just wanted to make one comment about the budget, which is just in relation to the property tax increase. I'm upset that we went with a 0% increase for many years, because now it gets pushed into these future years. And that's fine, perhaps for people who are expecting it, but new homeowners are not expecting it. And so that puts a lot of pressure on young families in our region. So it's something that I hope we are more mindful of in our future budgets.
Thank you, Councillor Loggins. Okay, any discussion on adopting the budget? I said my piece that I would like to have a committee of the whole so that we have the ability to talk about our expectations and some reports and what we want to see. Of course, you can make your motion, or anyone else can today as well after this. It's just, we know we also don't want to make motions on the fly without having all the information available on what that looks like. So this is things that I've heard from all members of council. I don't want staff to do 7 different reports to meet 7 different people's needs. We need to, as a council, come to a consensus on what our expectation is from our staff. So I'll call the question on adoption, please. All those in favor? Opposed? So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Okay. I won't talk about it anymore. I won't talk about it. So I'd like to make a motion that staff bring back for all contracts that we're going to award, and we can debate the value of $25,000 that comes back to council for approval. I'd like to make that motion. So I don't know if I got an easy. Okay.
Okay, so I'm just writing this down so I don't have to think and write at the same time.
And I know I surprised some people, but.
Okay, now what I heard you say was that staff provide a report. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to think and write at the same time, but thank you for the warning on the microphone. Staff provide a report that contracts of $25,000 or greater come to council for review and approval.
With a report on it.
Staff provide a report. And I just said staff provide a report that contracts of $25,000 or greater come to council for review and approval.
Perfect.
That's what you've moved, and that's what you've seconded. Query from our CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Pearson. Can I get some sense of what you expect in that report?
Okay.
Microphone.
Sorry, and through the chair to you, our CAO, so that we don't know what's going on. I guess so that it comes back. The case there. This is not about a vetting process of that contract. The contract has been decided by the staff, and even a small review or a small report. I don't want anything elaborate. I don't want this to be another make-work project or a make-work project. So it comes back, council, because then I think there's an opportunity. Something's missing in our process right now, and it feels like that to me. Counterintuitive. So.
Okay, can I just clarify that this is, so what I wrote down and read, and then staff were also listening and wrote down and read, and this is what we have here. So are you comfortable with that being the language in the motion before we continue? I just want that to be, so we know what we're speaking on and we're seeing it at the same time. See, and this is dealing with
amendment to the purchasing policy. I didn't say that.
No. I think staff's point is that if we did this, it would require an amendment in order to deliver that.
So I just put out there the number 25,000 for a base point, for a starting point for discussion for council. I think that is something that we need to talk about with the adoption of our 25 or with our 25-year plan, with our 5-year plan. That's all. I've got a seconder and a mover, so.
Yes.
So it's open for discussion.
I know, but is this the...
now it looks like it, yes.
Is this the motion? Before we continue on the dialogue, I want to ensure this is the language that we want in the motion. That council directs staff to provide a report regarding an amendment to the purchasing policy that includes contracts 25,000 or more be approved by council.
Yes.
Okay, so the mover and the seconder agree with the language? Okay, Councillor Casper, then Ray.
And if it means, so if I may, through you, if it means an amendment to the purchasing policy, then so be it. But just as a friendly reminder to everybody, it's been the past practice up until I think it was May or June of last year that all contracts that were put out to tender came back to council with a report and the contracts were approved for issuance. And I'm asking and suggesting that we go back to that practice. And it's the way it's always been done, within this organization for many years. And so I think that it gives better comfort to council, public, and staff that everybody's on the same page. Because our approved budget does not clearly identify where and how we're going to spend the money and who we're awarding the money to. And that's all I'm suggesting. It's all about transparency, clarity, and having all this information, especially when it's a publicly bidded process and a public process to go through a tendering process. And in my mind, the contract should be awarded in a public setting, and that's this venue, which is a council.
Okay, and that's fine. I guess where I'm a bit, was it then that council gave direction but never amended the policy at the time? Because the policies come about from this table as our direction. So is one's dated then, obviously.
Well, if that's the case, then so be it. Then the purchasing policy should be amended to reflect that.
Okay.
And I think that would give everybody comfort so that everybody's on the same page.
To Councillor Ray, please. Kevin.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to reiterate Councillor Casper's comment, it has been the practice since I started in 2011. Whether it was a best practice as opposed to actually following policy, I'm not sure. One of the things I think that both in my first term and in the second term is been that issue of transparency in terms of the bidding process. And there has been concerns that were actually reviewed at the council table when bids had come in, and I believe it was the Parks and Trail bids where we had 5, and there was concerns about the process. And I think that at the end of the day, when you're talking about contracts, and this table has a responsibility. So I do support it. At least until there's a time that there's a comfort level that things are moving the way that we feel that they should in terms of the issuance of contracts. So I don't have a problem supporting it. So thank you.
Okay, to our CAO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think we require a report for this resolution. If Council wants to resolve to do this right now, they can certainly do so. I'd like to, however, help staff understand what problems you're trying to correct, because I'm not aware of any.
Okay, I think for myself, I would like, just next meeting, we should review the purchasing policy, because our role is to govern and to set policy. So if people's understanding of best or past practice is this, but the policy says this, there's a disconnect, because anyone looking is going to say, what is your policy? And if I'm asked, and I give general direction to staff, I will look at the policy and say they're meeting policy. So the policy needs to be examined, and whether or not that had not been followed or different direction, well, we set policy. That's what good governance is about, and that's what we should strive for. So I think it's the case of not having staff do like a formal report. Just bring the policy back in form, and also in the meantime, I think it would be of benefit to staff if council could help explain, okay, this is how we saw something happen, and this is what actually happened. So where was your expectation not met in terms of delivery? And maybe this time is not, because this has sort of come up, and you may want some time just to think about some examples so that this way, and it has to be then, what is council's expectation? And I may have an expectation and you have yours, but council has decided this. So we as a whole need to come to what council expectation is. And if you have ones that are on the side, it's not going to be met as an individual because we're a collective here. Does that make sense? Okay, back to our CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our Deputy Corporate Officer just told me that there are a number of council policies that are being revised right now, and the purchasing policy is one of them. So staff have certainly had that on their radar, so we'll be happy to bring that back at your direction.
something changed in the language of the motion as we were speaking. It got shorter, I thought. No? Yes?
We just took out, as the CAO has advised, that we don't need to bring a report back. We can just do the amendment directly.
Okay, so maybe then it shouldn't be amendment, it should just be amend. That council directs staff to amend the purchasing. But I think we want to debate this amount. So this, like right now, the motion has changed to me now, in a sense. Like it's gone from having a report come back so that we can each as individuals take time to review it and formulate questions, to now just amending the policy on this, whereas there may be other amendments to the policy that are needed given our budget deliberations. So I think in terms of a report, all we need to do is have the motion from tonight and the purchasing policy, and that'll be enough. And then in the meantime, I think for council to think about expectations and us collectively, I just would like some time rather than us amending the policy now and then staff's doing their review and then we're going to amend it again. Let's just give that some good thought. Is that good with everyone? I see some hands. I'll go to Councillor Loggins and then Casper, please.
Thank you. That does make sense, and it is good with me. I'm just wondering if the current motion reflects that, or if it should say the report regarding amendments to just be inclusive of several, including this one that was brought up by Councillor Pearson.
I would put amendments in brackets. Okay, Councillor Casper, then Ray.
Well, through you, my question then is to the Director of Finance. As far as the practice, and I don't mean to put him on the spot, but I think it's important that there are some expectations, I'm sure, that he has or would like to see happen in regard to contracts and the past practice. I'm assuming that.
You are putting him on the spot.
Well,
Through your worship, to Councillor Casper, we do already, or we had been reporting all tendered contracts were coming back to council. I'm not sure if that had stopped for any particular reason, if we hadn't maybe let any that were greater than a certain amount after that date, but there's no reason I can think of why they hadn't been coming back. If this change is going to be made, then it changes our purchasing policy authorization limits potentially as well, because right now the CAO has authority up to 75. I and other department heads have up to 40, and managers. And we're getting, this is one of the reasons we're having the policy reviewed for us, and then we're coming back with it, is it doesn't really make sense with the way our organizational structure is right now. It maybe needs to be more, in keeping with the way we're actually doing business. So that'll be coming back when you see the policy come back from staff. Certainly, though, we had been reporting, and I think we still intend to be reporting on the RFP. $25,000 is the limit before we need to tender, so that's why it's in the policy. And then we had always been coming back with a report on here's the results of the tender.
Okay.
So if I may just, and I, through you, I appreciate that. And I think that's one example was contracts that were awarded for the maintenance that occurred last year. So they were small contracts. I think they were all over $25,000, but there was a series of them. And I'm not advocating that we nickel and dime every single contract, because I know there are contracts that are signed that deal with the day-to-day operation of the buildings, of the operation here. And I think what I'm trying to advocate through you, Madam Mayor, is that there are capital projects, other types of contracts that aren't clearly identified in this budget. The roads, for example, we don't know which roads. We don't know how much those are going to be. Those are the things that I talked about during the budget deliberations, or any other contract that is over that amount that is not clearly spelled out in this budget. Because something may come along, and we may have to go to tender for it. So I don't have a problem with staff going out to tender and seeking bids, because it's an item of business that's not identified. But at the same token, before those expenditures occur, then I think it's in everybody's interest, so we're all on the same page, that the tenders be presented, the staff report, and here's the staff recommendation, and then council makes a decision. Because it's a good business, sound business.
I think that's what I heard our Director of Finance say was the practice, and that's been followed.
Yep, through your worship. I mean, right now the policy, it is really 75. Anything over 75, it has to come back to council.
Okay.
And then the others, really, they don't have to. They've been coming back, I think, as a, just for transparency. But if that's what we're going with, then we'll have to bring everything over 25 back, which could be a fair number of contracts throughout the year. So.
Okay, to our CEO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly hope Councillor Casper and Pearson aren't suggesting that they start to approve RFP tenders. That's completely operational in nature and under the purview of the CAO. And as we said earlier, roads contracts will be coming back once we get the consultant study done. So those will be specifically identified in the budget.
Okay, so we'll get, next meeting, we'll have the purchasing policy, and let's talk about it a bit more. I think in the meantime, if there's an example of something, if you could let myself and staff know what that is in terms of what I'm hearing. There's still, I just can't quite grab what you're referring to, and I think that would be helpful in the time to come. I would also like a committee of the whole to be scheduled in May so that we as a council can talk a bit about the deliverance of the 5-year financial plan and in terms of what our expectations are, so we as a collective can determine what reports we want to expect from staff. We've talked a bit about budget to actual reports. How often do we want to receive these? And I think what sort of advertising, how are we going to carry out some events? These are just a handful of things that are just on the top of my mind. You may have other things that you would like some in from. The intent is not to micromanage staff, but I think it's just so we're not scrambling at the last minute trying to put a mayor's levy on because we wait. If we don't figure out who's going to carry out these things, they won't happen in some cases. So I think that's, and then here's a few things already that have come forward from councillors that are, we could all use the benefit of further time for. Final comments, Councillor Pearson?
And I'm fine if we bring this forward to a next meeting. And through the chair to our staff, this wasn't meant to be micromanaging. That was not the intent. It was that there's been a few issues, and I'll bring up some examples in the next meeting. I wanted to, and I was happy with it. I thought maybe we could get that higher or something, right? Because I know that you can't buy much for $25,000. From my point of view, is that I want to make sure that there's clarity because the public has raised it several times with me about, okay, well, what are you guys doing? Did you know that was going on? There's a perception out there. Maybe it's not as large as I worry about, but that we use our policy to get around transparency sometimes, awarding multiple contracts and things like that, or breaking them into smaller constituent elements. Just those are perceptions, and I don't believe they're reality, but I just wanted to bring this forward at the passing of the budget because we've done a really good job.
If I may, thank you, Councillor Pearson, through your worship.
Yep.
If anybody in the public comes to you with any sort of concerns with respect to us going around transparency or breaking rules or whatever, I should be the first person to hear about it, and I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
So I would encourage any member of council, if this is out there in the community in any way, shape, or form, please let me know.
Okay.
It's my job to deal with that.
Yeah. And again, tonight, and I want to go through the charities, the purpose of me bringing this up wasn't to sort of set you on your heels or that, or make any accusations, because I don't believe that. So I just want to say that there's some things out there. I just wanted to sort of get some rigor around that policy. That was where I started from. So, okay.
Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as a comment, this discussion occurred in the first term, so this isn't unique to what's occurring now. There was a debate and actually changes to the policy between 2011 and 2014 that also included the local list that was to be used by local suppliers. So this is ongoing, and I just think that it's important that this isn't just starting now. This is from a previous term as well. Same conversation.
It did happen before, but then staff were restricted and couldn't pay a hydro bill one month without bringing it to council because the amount was low, and it impacted operations. So I think that's where I'm just sensing there's a bit of a reaction here, and I think this is where it is the case. If you are hearing, we just need to clarify so that our CAO can follow through and address those concerns. Can I call the question on this, please? All this in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we've dealt, 9.1, there's an item here from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Moving the motion, please, and that's been moved by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Ray, and that's as stated. Is there there's no questions. Any questions from council? And that's council provide direction to... Okay, so when we move this, I know, but it's the motion as stated is that council provide direction to staff on whether they wish to provide the payment. So,
my intent was to provide the payment.
Okay, so the intent is that council provide the payment.
We need you to adopt the 5-year financial plan.
We've done that.
Oh, you have?
Yes.
Wow, I missed it.
Yeah, no, that's been done.
Thank you.
And then we made another motion on the purchasing policy, and we're good. Yeah. So in this case, council is supporting the $276.16 to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for Legal Defence Fund. Moved by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Ray. All those in favour? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Thank you. We dealt with 9.2. 9.3 is the turf field project. So there's been some queries raised here just in regards to the restrictive covenant that was in place, and also the intention of when the $400,000 was put in to the fund for the turf field. I know I think it was April of last year, council made a motion that this fund be moved towards the turf field project, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Your Worship. On the staff report on page 65, March 21st of last year is when the $400,000 was approved from the Playing Field Reserve Fund to go towards the turf field project, and then there was a meeting in April that approved an additional $300,000 from the gas tax funds to go towards the project.
So that covers us off in terms of the $400,000 being used exclusively on Southern River lands. Okay, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, being mindful of Ms. Hall's comments, my recollection, and I totally stand to be corrected, my recollection was that there was an amendment to the contract or change to the contract with the Sun River Group that talked about changing what that $400,000 was for. So I think there may be some paperwork subsequent to what Ms. Hall was supplying this evening that actually was an agreement between the Sun River Group and the District of Sooke to use those funds that were to be provided in cash in an alternate manner. So I don't believe that we are in violation of any contract. So just perhaps as a comment, maybe staff might want to just double check that, but that's my recollection. I see some nods, but
Okay, Councillor Pearson?
Yes, and that's exactly what transpired, is that the 400,000, and we were very strong in our wording that the 400,000 remained intact in a special fund, so that it could only be used for and at the completion of the field or reasonable or something like that. Then there was discussion at the time of the community association owning the land, and that we had to enter into a lifetime agreement or something for the public access. There was some discussion around. I don't remember if it actually got put into the thing, but there was. So it was a lot of robust discussion around that.
Okay, so what staff is looking for in terms, so that those pieces then is contractual conditions for the release of the funds. So how are we going to look at having those funds released? Councillor Casper.
Well, I would strongly recommend ironclad contract, because to ensure that the money, if it is spent, here are the conditions, and I'm assuming that the community association would also want a contract, because that gives them comfort too. So it works both ways. So I'm hoping that both parties could sit down and actually work on that contract, because we have to clearly demonstrate that money can only be given in a certain prescribed manner, and unless and I really right now, if there's a budget shortfall, then I don't think any money should go out until funds have been identified, and perhaps through the Sea Park or the Recreation group, because apparently they're going to be involved in some way, that the committee and council may want to go to Sea Park and see if there's any funding available through their large funds, because they have a substantial surplus, and they have the ability to put together an arrangement or a contract that would suit their purpose too. I'm just looking at opportunities here, but I don't think anybody would support, including the community association, spending money unless you've got an ironclad contract. That's just my view.
Okay, so we'd like to see a contract returned to council then for review and approval. Okay, to our Director of Finance, please.
Yes, Your Worship. And we've had discussions with the Community Association committee people and the Sooke Soccer Association and Sea Park as well about what we need to see first, and a budget, not just laying out the costs, but laying out the funding sources, and a plan for ongoing maintenance and potential replacement down the road. So those kind of things haven't yet been developed, so that would be something we can work in as a condition into a contract. I suggest then we tailor it like our gas tax agreement, which, because part of the funds are gas tax funds, it has pretty good condition reporting in there, and I can put something together and bring it back to the next meeting then.
Well, just as a follow-up, I hope during those discussions we include the Capital Regional District, because 300,000 is being funded through that organization.
Yeah, through Your Worship to Councillor Casper. The CRD was providing 300,000, and the way they wanted that to be managed is they had an agreement with us because it's gas tax funds. They are the ultimate, the reporting party. Really, the community association is the ultimate recipient, but the gas tax funds require all sorts of reporting, not to mention 6 years of record kept and all that stuff. So all those things will need to be built into an agreement, and so we would have an agreement between ourselves and the community association. We would also have an agreement between ourselves and the CRD.
Okay, so we'll look for that report. Councillor Luggins?
One thing that I'm just thinking of now is the involvement of Sea Park in all of this, because I guess Ms. Hall's words are just echoing when she was talking about public funds going to a restricted area. And right now it is pretty accessible. Like the community association is pretty great with their bookings and getting people on the field. But if it were to be passed on to Sea Park, I don't know if it is or not, but if that was the plan down the line, I'm getting a nose. Okay, good. That's just what I was wondering, if anyone had a clue if that was going on or not, and what Sea Park's involvement was in that, because I didn't. What is Sea Park's involvement?
I think my sense, and Councillor Casper alluded to it, is that Sea Park also has a reserve, and would they be contributing to the project? At one point, Sea Park actually applied for a significant grant and did a number of conceptual plans and the like, but was unsuccessful in getting in the grants. But they were applying on and working with the community association to obtain that. But they work, an example how they work together now is there's a playing field at Sea Park for ball, and then there's other ball fields around. So there is coordination amongst sporting organizations in that regard.
I guess I'm just thinking ahead of, because we've heard from the community association that, you know, they're a group with a lot of elderly members that are tasked with quite a lot in this community. And if they don't, you know, like, I'm just thinking farther down the line, where are these funds going to go towards? Is it going to be a place that remains in the community association forever? Is it going to one day become the districts? Is it going to one day become Sea Parks? And I know I'm probably thinking way too far ahead, but it's a lot of money.
And I think that's the concern that was raised, was that there's a lot of funds going into a private entity who could then do something, but they would need to establish their succession plan and what that looks like. Councillor Ray? Councillor Lay did serve as a liaison to the community association.
Yeah, and I actually hope to attend a meeting tomorrow night. I just want to be mindful of the role that the community association has played in the history of our community and what they have fundraised and then given in terms of, for example, they fundraised and bought the land the museum is on and where Sea Park is. And that was all turned over for, I believe, if I recall, $1. So, yes, it may be an association, but it really is an association that has helped build the community. And I just, I think all the questions and comments are great, but for the public, and, you know, I recognize the concern, but I don't want, in light of Ms. Hall's comments, I don't want us to forget what role they have played where we are today.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that you raised that. It's the same as us allocating funds to the community hall, for example. And again, it's an excellent amenity for many generations.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I'm just thinking down the line if it is no longer the community associations. But no, I completely agree, yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Has this been moved?
Oh, so moved.
Moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Ray. Okay, are we clear on what we're moving? Yeah. We're clear to vote. All those in favor, please vote. Okay. 9.4 Sun River Seniors Village. Main question that's come up is the access to the water. Is that turning into a I still don't see that quite. I don't understand where that's being answered, if I could get.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we go into Ms. Hall's earlier comments with respect to this being in the ALR and not being park, and that she has papers that she's prepared to drop off tomorrow, this is within the purview of the approving officer, which is a separate piece of provincial legislation that this council doesn't have control over. The approving officer has stated on a number of different occasions that is significant concerns with respect to putting in a road in this particular location due to the 4 reasons that were cited in the report. I would encourage Mayor and Council to take a look at staff's recommendation and allow our approving officer to deal with this matter.
Okay, thank you very much for that. My question, though, is and what I see here is about not having a road go to the river, but will the public be able, would anyone here who doesn't live in this part of the development be able to go down that path and have a picnic there? Or will it be gated, and is it exclusive to only the residents that live there?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there is access further down to this quote-unquote park. If what Ms. Hall is saying is true, and I don't have any reason to doubt the veracity of her words, but if it is in fact a park and it's up to the district to actually put a border around the park so that public does not have access, then that's something we need to consider this year.
I think, okay, there's two different things. What I heard Ms. Hall say is that there's ALR lands and they need to have a buffer of a trail, and those because those lands don't belong, like there's parts of the ALR lands that don't belong to the district that are in the middle of the subdivision. So they need to have, there needs to be a buffer, and then they need to be fenced. And I've seen part of that along Southern River Way connecting over to the new section. In terms of concerns raised by Mr. Martin, was that where this road goes through into this particular section, and then there's access down to the water, that the general public cannot access the water or the river via that trail, that it would be exclusive only to the residents that live in this particular part of the development. And that's where the term, it's being gated off. It's turning into a gated community within Sun River. And that's where, I haven't seen it myself, but it looks like gate posts are coming up. And will the public be restricted from having access? So there are two different parts. Councillor Ray, maybe?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess in terms of the comments that Ms. Hall had this evening, it was my understanding that where the new part of the subdivision is on Shamrock Way, then there's that land that he has. Then there is ALR land, but there is a strip at the very bottom along the river's edge that was supposed to be dedicated as park. Mm-hmm. And if I'm hearing Ms. Hall right tonight, because we haven't done something, that is no longer park. It needs a buffer from the ALR. I guess my question is, in the development document, is Sun River, and I'm just using Sun River for the Sun River Seniors Village, is there anything in the subdivision that prohibits him as a landowner to create a gated community in the first place? The second piece, while I understand Mr. Martin's concern, I'm not readily agreeing that the public should have access in great numbers to that area, because starting in September, that becomes a critical spawning area for the salmon to go up to Charters Creek. And so I have concerns about a lot of public access and dogs and people in the river when the salmon are trying to get back up to the Charters River. So that is something that I'm trying to be mindful. It doesn't mean I'm absolutely opposed to it, but it's something that I feel that we should consider. But first and foremost is there anything prohibiting the developer from gating his community in the first place?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Ray. I'm not sure if there's anything prohibiting a developer from doing so, but if you go to the staff report on page 71, under the report, the second paragraph in the second last sentence, it says the applicant has constructed a walkway from the end of Shamrock Drive to the existing park, which provides adequate access to the river. So I think that answers maybe most of your questions.
Councillor Casper?
Well, I'm on the view that I support the contention that Mr. Martin had presented, that the provisions of the Land Title Act, Section 75, may not be met. And I'm not satisfied, that Mr. Martin would have to take it upon himself to appeal to the approving officer. I'd suggest that council and the district actually appeal to the approving officer and have that decision appealed. Because when you read all the sections, it's it doesn't say may, it says must. And then if there is no other provisions to provide water access, and I'm not hung up if it's less than 20 meters, because I'm not fully supportive or feel that there should be that type of width access going down to the river. But when we were first approached to allow and made an amendment to the CD zoning for this development, I can't recall anybody telling me that this was going to be a gated community at all. It never came up. And then, lo and behold, I get something in the mail, saying that here's a gated community. They call it a gated community. In their advertising. In the advertising. I got that in the mail. But I strongly contend that the provisions of the Land Title Act should be met in this case, where there should be access to the general public to the river. Whether it's a park, whether it's ALR, I don't care. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is water access. And then it says 200 meters between the center lines and on in a rural area where the parcels into which the land is subdivided all exceed 0.5 hectares at distances no greater than 400 meters between the center lines. So I read all this stuff. I'm only a layperson, but it was always my understanding that these were the things that should be done. And I'm going to go back to a little bit of history here. When we contemplated and we gave instructions to dispose of one of these statutory right-of-ways that were done under the Land Title Act, we were told loud and clear that when we do that, then we have to make provisions and make sure that other water accesses to the river are secured. So we've already made a decision to wipe out one within our municipality, and that's where we agreed to sell the property to two property owners to go from their property all the way down to the river. So we got a fairly lengthy report saying what our obligations were as a municipality. So bearing that in mind, I'm going back now because it's a memory thing here, then we should be insistent on making sure that we recoup and we actually get an additional access to the water. Because when you look along this whole stretch, there isn't adequate access to the water by way of land title provisions and what's required. So I'm just throwing that out. And if anybody should be appealing, it should be the district, it should be council. And I'm fully cognizant and fully recognize council cannot interfere in the duties of the approving officer, statutory position, but we have the right to appeal any decision. And I think the information, and I want to thank Mr. Martin for what he brought to our attention, and because it was an eye-opener for me. Yes. So I don't know how you guys feel, but...
Okay, Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the requirement is that you have to provide vehicle access. Right? And that's what I understood Mr. Martin was wanting, was to provide vehicle access and parking down on the property down below. I mean, currently the river does have access at another point along the river bank, 500 meters maybe, if that. It is not easy to get down to the river from there, and I don't have any difficulty with foot traffic down to the river. But I think Mr. Martin was asking that have vehicle access and parking was made available at the bottom, and that I do have a problem with.
Okay, I think that is one piece, and the vehicle access, and we have heard received a response as to why there isn't vehicle access. But that aside, it's still, will the public have access to the river?
Our approving officer says yes.
Okay.
It's in the report.
I'll move the recommendation. Let's get it.
The recommendation's been moved. Is there a seconder? It's been seconded. That council refer the matter regarding Sun River Seniors Village subdivision to the approving officer for response to Mr. Martin in compliance with the legislation. So that's been moved and seconded. It's just, and I hear what I just don't see public access. So that's the part that's missing for me in the report. So it does say the applicant has constructed a walkway from the end of Chambord Ride to the exit which provides adequate access to the river. But then I'm hearing that there's marketing materials and there's a gate being constructed. So that's where, is this access only for those visitors, those that reside there and their guests by invitation, or will the public have access to this? Councillor Ray?
Yes, Your Worship, I believe the sidewalk goes around. Like, they've put in a sidewalk from the top of Phillips Road all the way down into the new area, and the gates are for the vehicle traffic being gated. There's no blockage that I'm aware of, and I walked down there and I've driven down there, that blocks anybody using the sidewalk to have access to the area. So I'm not feeling that it's a gated community in the sense that the public doesn't have access to use the sidewalks.
Right. I mean, sidewalks are, I'm just, just want to know that anybody who wants to go there for a picnic can go there without having invited by someone that lives there. Is that, because you said you received some materials or something. So I just want to ensure that the public has access. And that was just a question that kept coming up. So I just didn't see, I see access, I didn't see public access.
I can confirm with our Director of Development Services that it is actually public access.
It is public access. So he's watching via webcast and answering, I suppose, just because I don't see him in the room. Okay.
Okay. I need it.
Okay, with a couple of Councillor Casper, then Ray.
Yeah. So,
speaking to the motion.
Yes, I am speaking the motion. So just through you, and I know it's very difficult for staff to actually confirm, but access in conjunction with this subdivision and with this development. And it's some form of public access down to the river in conjunction with this development. Not 500 meters at another location, but in conjunction with this development. Yes. That's what I want comfort in. Because then, if that's the case, then it would in some way, shape, or form meet the requirements of the Land Title Act, where some form of water access. Yeah.
Yeah, this does. Like the trail does go to the river.
So is that in conjunction with this subdivision?
Yes, that is for this particular part.
So I just want to make sure, and I've got to have good comfort in my mind that the Land Title Act is being applied and there is access. Like, I'm not hung up on having something 20 meters wide. I know what's doable, what isn't. Yeah. So, as long as there's access, that's what I care about.
Yeah, there is access. That's what we're hearing. Okay? In this particular part.
And it's in relation to the subdivision that is being looked at, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Ray?
If I may, Your Worship, perhaps maybe we could just do a small amendment to the motion.
Okay.
The motion does talk about the Sun River Seniors Village subdivision to the approving officer for response to Mr. Martin in compliance with public access as required by the legislation. And so that the public access is actually worded in the motion. If I moved it, so
okay,
you need
there's
a
seconder for the amendment, Councillor Loggins. Any discussion on the amendment in adding in that language in compliance with public access? Councillor Pearson on the amendment.
I guess.
Microphone.
Okay.
I guess the trouble is the unfettered access. You know what I mean? Access is one thing, and then.
Well, that's why public access is public access.
I understand that, but I mean, I'm hearing of gates, and like we all hearing the same stories. But once it's up, then what's the guarantee? I guess that's the problem.
Well, that's for me. Public access is that if you want to go down there at 4 a.m. to watch the salmon, you can.
Or go fishing.
Or go fishing, or watch the stars, or go for a moonlit walk. On a weekend or on a holiday, you're not going through a gate. It's public access. If it said restricted public access, that would be different. Like you can go to our boat launch at any time of day, at any time.
Right.
Because it's public access. We don't have a curfew in place in this community, thankfully.
But it goes back to Councillor Casper's point is that once it's built, and we all know how things morph.
But that's why do you want to have 24/7 unrestricted public? Like to me, is public access. That's what and then so Councillor Ray has proposed this so that it's clear there.
Yeah. I get it. It's just that, suddenly you're going through a development that's a gated community, and all of a sudden the intuition feels that, are you intruding? Because if you're a member of the public, that means a member of all public, not just the people in Sooke who know. That means somebody who comes from Victoria. All of a sudden you see a gated community, you see a gate. It lends itself to intuitively not providing access. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm good.
Go ahead to our CAO.
Through your worship to Councillor Pearson, we can certainly put up wayfinding signs for the public as we do on most of our parks and trails.
Yep.
All the Sun River trails have some sort of signage. I mean, this discussion is much like there are access points to the waters that are other areas in Sooke that the residents living in those areas have taken away, and nobody knows that those accesses exist anymore, right? But this is where it's public access. I'm going to call the question on the amendment.
Yeah, okay, I'm good.
All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? We're back to the main motion as amended. Councillor Loggins, please.
Thank you. I am just looking at our report. So we have the diagram on page 82, and that one was just brought up by staff on the screens. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. There's the green section with the parking, and then the blue section that's been identified with the trail down there as well. But if you, and you will have to use your imagination, but if you overlay that map with the one on page 80, it appears as though, and I'm just guessing, that these little squiggly lines are gates. They may not be. I may be completely ignorant as to what those are, but there are a couple little S squiggly lines that block the road on Shamrock Way, and if you overlay that last map onto this one here, then if those are gates, it looks like there would be restricted access. If they are not, then I could be completely wrong, but there would be at least one gate to get through to reach the parking area.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, Your Worship. My feeling is that once this resolution is passed and the intention of this council, if there are gates that are blocking that public access, they'll have to come down.
Yeah, our motion has been stated that way. Any further discussion on the amended motion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Okay. Okay. New business. I believe the new business pertains to correspondence in the materials, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just going to look at our 73. There's a Sooke Fall Fair donation request in the amount of $125. 11.1?
We have some new business under 10.1.
I know, but I just asked if this is pertaining to, if these materials are related to the CRD correspondence in the agenda, that they're supplementary. So they're not, or they are?
They are. There is a piece of correspondence that was brought to council's attention March 31st, which is part of the correspondence. And
Right.
Yeah.
And so these are supplementary. So I was
Related.
going to deal with that once we got to the correspondence.
Okay.
Because they're materials related to that. Right? Okay. So Sooke Fall Fair, $125 request for advertising in Rosette from the sponsorship budget, and that the Fall Fair receive $40 for a trophy at the Sooke Car Show event from the council sponsorship budget. So it'll be a total of $165. Moved by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Ray. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. 11.2, there's a request for a support letter from Woodwind Farms. Okay, moved sending the support letter. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion on the support letter? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Okay, now we get to the block of all the correspondence, and it's item from March 31st, letter from Ministry of Community, Sport, Cultural Development to the Chair regarding the regional growth strategy. And that's what, there were concerns raised by council just in terms of how the arbitration process goes, because we as a municipality supported the draft regional growth strategy, and then it does have to be unanimous. So there were several municipalities that did not, and so now it's off to the arbitration. My understanding is that any proposed changes to the RGS always have to come back to the board to be resolved, but at the same time, there was a concern that this is of significant impact to our community, so that we have a presence there, in which case we did, there would be legal costs that we would have to arbitration for in parts of the arbitration. And that was some of the pieces that staff, and I was sent speaking notes, but I don't have them printed, so I just have to find them here. My iPad is dead. Okay. So, discussion from council, please. Councillor Casper, go ahead.
Yes, I think we should participate in the arbitration process. I know staff did a lot of research and got a rough estimate as to how the allocation of costs would pan out, and I think Sooke's percentage would be roughly 2% of the total cost. If the costs are estimated at $60,000, then Sooke's share would be 2% of that, which didn't seem to be a lot of money, some $700,000.
700,000.
No, sorry, $700.
$700.
So if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So it was a very small percentage. Or maybe it was more than that. $1,200, I guess.
$1,200. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, we do have funds in our legal budget. Okay, Councillor Ray, please. Then.
Yes. Do we want to put a cap on it?
We can once we head to arbitration.
Okay.
Councillor Pearson.
Well, I just think that it's important that we participate in it, because we were, some of the rumblings that are out there, we've supported the regional growth strategy, and some of the principles that we have that we supported are being challenged from other municipalities. So it's not fair for us not to be there representing ourselves. So thank you.
No, I think it's important, even if there's proposed changes to the RGS that do come back to the board, I think being there, even to witness how that discussion has evolved, is important to us. The current RGS was 2003, I believe it was developed, so it's been a long time in the making, and the matters that we raise that are important to us that other municipalities are choosing not to support are significant in terms of our community and how we see our growth occurring in our OCP, and all these things have been done in a democratic fashion. So I think it's the case that over time, if we see this arbitration going on, then we would then have ample ways to support a budget amendment for additional legal fees that would deal with this matter specifically. Okay, so here we have that council directs staff to notify the Capital Regional District that the District of Sooke will participate in the non-binding dispute resolution process regarding the Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Loggins, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any further discussion? And I think this is where, when we talk about budgeting, is getting a sense just so we can track what our legal fees associated to this specifically look like. Should say that Director Hicks publicly stated that the Wanda Fuca would pay some or all of our legal fees. That would be recorded on the CRD's webcast.
Did he say that?
He did, yes. But that's because of the impact in the Wanda Fuca and their own community, but the same argument applies in our areas, North Sooke and the like, that aren't. It's the same matter of fact. So maybe he's watching, I doubt it. Okay, any further questions on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, thank you very much, staff, for putting the materials together. I think it's something that would be handy to have as a useful process going forward as we get updates. Councillor Reid?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if we can pull the item, the email from Louise Anderson. It's on page 122 of the consent business.
What date is that?
April the 4th. And it's page 122 of our package. And I'm just not sure what the procedure is to address concerns such as Ms. Anderson's. The issue is that she's looking to the District of Sooke for a solution to a problem between Connie Road and Gillespie Road on Sooke Road, and whether or not there's been a response to Ms. Anderson that in fact Sooke Road is actually the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure responsibility. I'm just not sure if anything went back to her to say thank you for your concern in your letter. Can we direct you to meet with the ministry or talk with the ministry?
No, there would be no response that would come in, that this would go through, and then it would be, if should council have direction, then... Yeah.
I guess for me, one of the things is that when we do get letters in, such as this, from members of our community, that there be some form of response, because they're looking to the District of Sooke for a solution, when in fact Highway 14 is the Ministry of Transportation. So if you'd like a motion, Your Worship, I'd move that staff send a letter back to Ms. Anderson advising her that issues with Highway 14 is in the realm of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Is there a seconded by Councillor Loggins? Okay. Just speaking on that, because when we receive this and it goes through info, we don't, I can't respond because I don't, unless I Google and try to find the person. So yes, this would be the appropriate mechanism to send something back. The province has recently made some announcement of some improvements that they're rolling out. I still haven't seen what their actual plan is, but there's all sorts of news releases coming out, so maybe this is something that she could even pose to one of the candidates and ask, but you're exactly right. So I'll call the question on that. All those in favor, please. Opposed, motion's carried. Any other items of discussion in regards to the correspondence?
Move receipt.
Move receipt by Councillor Pearson. Seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. And any reports from members of council? For myself, I'm going to keep this brief because my voice won't let me do this. we announced that we will be working with the South Island Division of Family Practice in terms of achieving soft costs towards identifying an appropriate health facility within our community. We're still waiting for the actual proposal to be finalized, so I don't know what that looked like. Thanks to the Sooke News Mirror, though, that caught that. They did an article on what health. Now, I put out hospital. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is the best fit for our community. Of course, I think just the timing with the provincial election. I've now been on CTV, Vancouver Island News, CFAX, CBC Radio, Times Colonist, and then the Sooke Pocket News asked if I had any questions, because I put stuff on my Facebook page. And I said, yes, these are some questions that I'm trying to get, because I've been getting a lot of people phoning and sharing their experiences, because that's what I'm looking for. And then there was an overwhelming response to the survey that went online. Council Loggins also through the MCS has statistical information and the like. The CRD Vice Chair, Dave Howe, and I have talked about this before in the past, which is why the CRD's hospital committee has changed to hospital and housing, so they could look at regional centers that aren't all located in the core. When people ask, well, how do you expect to pay this? Well, you already are paying for medical services not located in this community, by the way. So there was a sense of, well, why don't you put a notice of motion forward to the CRD board through that committee to see if the CRD would actually look at a pilot. My problem always goes back to the province, and that they continually say that we are within so many distances of a major center, mainly Vic General or St. Anthony's in Langford. I struggle with that because this ribbon of a highway and the challenges of that highway are life and death for our residents. And I've heard a lot of very, very tough stories to hear from our residents. The challenge I have is going up to Campbell River and back. Campbell River has a hospital, Port Alberni has one, Tofino has one, Parksville, Ladysmith, and so on. Comox have one, Chemainus has one, Nanaimo, Duncan, as we go through. And then, no, we don't. I don't look at Sooke only, I look at the region that we would potentially service and already do, being the Wanda Fuca as well, potentially even parts of Metchosin. So there was an appetite to explore this, as much like the CRD is putting together a project of some $50 million for affordable or hard-to-house a housing project in Victoria that would service Victoria. So it's the case of, why don't we look at something that would service our residents? I say hospital, which take all sorts of forms. Parksville is Oceanside, which is urgent and primary care with diagnostic imaging all together. So sometimes when you say primary health or urgent care, what does that actually mean? Those are health industry terms. I just say hospital at the end. If there's something that has a helicopter landing pad that provides another access point to Victoria General, well, maybe that's a good thing. But I think we're continually growing, unprecedented growth, 48% since incorporation, an aging population, young families. We are underserviced. So for me as the mayor, and to have the privilege of sitting here, to sit here and do nothing, after what I continually hear ever since I was elected, the challenges that our residents face in both Highway 14 and health, I cannot do nothing. I can't. It's too painful. I have to do something, and that's exploring every avenue that I can. The CRD will look at non-traditional means. Now, a VHA, and it all comes down to policy, so that's where it's the case of, through the Primary Health Working Group, a lot of materials. I mean, staff managed to round this up in no time already, and this doesn't include what I already have as well. So when I asked about this at the CRD committee level, they said, okay, we just need some supporting materials. So fine, I'm going to give you supporting materials and see where it goes. So that's been the main focus. I think it's try and see what happens, but doing nothing is not an option for me. And if we end up at the end with a modern X-ray facility, that might be nice, considering nobody else has heard of analog. You told me a few years ago, Councillor Casper, to get political. Well, I am. And so just keep working on it. So in this case, I thank the media. I know, and I'll take it. I thank the media for shining a light on this, because the timing has worked out well in terms of generating more of a response and getting it on the provincial radar. But the letters that I've received, I mean, I think as a council we've done great for advocating for Highway 14. We have a plan that will be coming. We're hearing announcements of short-term improvements that are starting. I think it's great to do a plan, but I want to see what their funding commitments are, the medium and long term, as addition to just short-term pieces. But we are doing our best there. The next one that I always get is medical, all the time. And every day since I've been elected, I will talk or hear something from somebody about this. So here's an opportunity, and in this case, it's been good media in keeping this going, and it's on the radar now. But the letters I always get are, you're within so many kilometers of a major center, so that would meet your needs. Well, it doesn't, and I'm not giving up as long as I'm sitting here. So that's the main piece, and I'm going to start coughing, so perhaps some of the others can share AVICC Council.
And thank you for that update. One of the things that I always find interesting is that when they use kilometers as a tool to set something rather than time. I mean, you know, up in the north, if you try to go from Dease Lake to Telegraph Creek, it's like 90 kilometers, but it takes you more than 2 hours to drive it. When I go from Parksville to Nanaimo Hospital from the clinic, it's not 20 minutes. And yet getting from Sooke to Vic General is probably closer to 35, 38 minutes. So, you know, when they use one tool as a way of measuring, I think it becomes unfair, because it doesn't really capture what the people of Sooke endure in terms of time of driving a road at 60 kilometers an hour, as long as they don't get stuck behind somebody going slower, you know, in an emergency.
Councillor Logan.
Sorry, I don't want to try to turn this into a discussion, but just to add to Councillor Ray's points, services are being moved from VGH to Royal Jubilee, so it's even farther, really, and that needs to be considered.
It's an hour and a half in that case. Okay. If you're in a car, bus isn't even an option, really. It's a long day otherwise. Okay, other comments or updates at this point? Go ahead, Sir Pearson.
Save your voice. Just to let everybody know that I did attend AVICC over the past weekend. Councillor Casper, along with you, your worship, Mayor Tait, saw some interesting presentations, saw some interesting things. We toured Councillor Casper and I toured the John Hart Dam and saw the requirements for Campbell River's water supply that will be turning off in January of 2018. As a result of Hydro doing upgrades to theirs. So the entire city's water supply has to be, the intake to the water supply has to be revamped. Started off as a $16 million project, is now at $28 million, and reverse engineering for them is that they have a deadline of January 2018, which I found very interesting, and taking all the normal processes that cities and municipalities and councils have to go through and compressing it. Because, you know, the public hearing piece, all of that has to be done in that same time frame. And so doing a remarkable job. And we saw some cool, we saw a first used, or described to us a first used drilling machine that goes out into the water and drills into a live lake, and then the recovery mechanism for this thing is they float it to the top of the lake. And then when they turn the drill, or they turn the tunnel back on, scuba divers have to go down and remove the plugs. One has to go into the pipe from one end, and one has to go in the pipe from the other end, and allow the lake to get into the intake. So it's pretty cool. Interesting, there was lots of discussion on things. There was several good speakers that I think we all heard, ranging from solid waste on the island to the one I found the most interesting was the, how would I describe it? The public staff council interactions with respect and fairness in the workplace, that discussion.
UBCM one.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear that we're not unique. It's sad to say, but we're not unique, and we heard some what I would describe as horror stories of councils that are in our local area, of things that have gone on. And people saying what had happened to them inside council chambers and things like that. It was very eye-opening. Like I say, it was disheartening to know that we're not alone in some of the things that the challenges that we have. Interesting presentation that I saw on the last day, on Sunday, was a presentation on health for children, and it was very telling that a couple of crazy facts that were there is that we've changed the way that we live based on that we feel our children will be hurt, harmed, or taken away by a stranger. So a stranger taking your child is a 1 in 14 million chance. That's the actual stat behind it. Yet 1 out of 4 children are obese. So you spend a lot of time worrying about your child being stolen 1 out of 14 million times. Obviously that's a horrible thing to happen. But nobody's worrying about the children. First time in history that children will be dying sooner than their parents. Not sooner than their parents, but have a shorter lifespan than their parents. So some good discussion, some interesting resolutions and some interesting debate. And to see and there was a parliamentarian there that corrected things along the way that I found was very interesting. Nils Jensen got up and challenged the way a bylaw or the way that a motion was made, and people were trying to separate it, and it caused a great deal of interesting discussion, parliamentarian type discussion. So, anyways, I've kept it high level, but there was lots of interesting things there, and I enjoyed my time there with the mayor and Councillor Casper. So.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I just want to add that Councillor Pearson and I attended a workshop, and the purpose of that was around similar issues that the mayor has raised in regard to health services within communities. And there were a lot of suggestions that came out of that workshop, which ABICC will be posting for the general public and to also all the member municipalities. What we heard and what we saw was that we're not unique in the concerns. There are a lot of communities that are facing existing walk-in clinics closing because of doctor shortages. Even Esquimalt raised some issues that perhaps senior levels are not listening to what their concerns are, and they're in very close proximity, but they also have health care issues that they want to see addressed locally. So we heard that from far and wide, and those who are near too. So Councillor Pearson and I flipped a coin, and he was going to give the bulk of the presentation as to what we did. Thank you.
So it was a working group, and one of those groups that you walk in, and so the questions, it was interesting. So the questions were put out for group discussions. What can health network coordinators do to make local leaders comfortable with systems, charge, and health motives standards? How can communities support primary and secondary health care in our local community? Safe injection sites, who, what, where, when, and why? How do local governments get Island Health to come and engage with them? Post-high school mental health community education and supports. How does Island Health implement the priorities the community they serve? These are all handwritten notes, right? So what can local communities do to encourage increased family physicians? What is the cost of inadequate, unaffordable housing to the healthcare system? So those were discussions that were all out there, and it was interesting to, as Councillor Casper was saying, right in behind the mayor's statement, communities are all experiencing the same thing. There's some big schmoozy woozy hospitals being built on the island, but there's a lot of remote communities that are not having adequate health care. And, you know, you get out past Port Alberni to Tofino and some of those smaller villages and things like that. Just in the group that I was in, and some First Nations communities where they're having trouble attracting even a nurse to come to their communities. And it's a boat ride. You know, we're talking about Highway 14. Some of those people are a boat ride away. And, you know, the conditions of the sea to dictate whether the boat can go, and, you know, to get helicopters or anything in there. So it was interesting. Anyways.
There is a survey, Councillor Pearson touched on it, for elected officials to complete that's being done through the UBCM, and this is the working group on responsible conduct. And so there was printed form available at AVICC, and there's also a survey on the website. There is a closing date, so I would encourage you to, if you haven't done it, to complete that.
We submitted ours.
Yes, but there's also for both Councillor Loggins and Ray, and the CAO had also launched that out. So if you need the link again, just let me know. I could answer all of those questions from your working group. I think the advantage for Sooke is that Mayor Milne put together the working group on health that I now chair, and it already put all the stakeholders at the table and initiated the process. So in many ways, I'm grateful for his leadership, and also that's a big part, is bringing people together. I'll add that Sooke's children, not only because you started this, are actually unhealthier than our other kids in Greater Victoria because of the reliance on vehicle here. Anything else from councillors? To our CAO?
Just one thing to report, that the chief and I attended the fire chief and district administrators conference this weekend. And I want to thank the chief for his time. I think part of what was most validating for me is that as we go through the checklist of what you need to do to have a strong, good relationship with your fire chief and your community, we were going tick, tick, tick down the list. So that was affirming for me. I think we're doing a good job. Is there room for some improvement in some areas? Sure, but given where other CAOs and fire chiefs' relationships are across the province, we're doing really, really well. So thank you, Chief, for your time.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Loggins. Our volunteer recognition ceremony is next Tuesday. We do this every term, and we had put a call out last year, and so this is being held.